everybody. I'm Matt Anderson, and welcome to The Road Not Taken, how ordinary people got out of their own way, and you can too. Our guest today, I'm excited to introduce Adam King, who is a self-confessed marketing geek, captain of Think Like a Fish, and host of the Client Catching podcast. His company was founded to solve a pain point that he was constantly hearing from other service professional providers and advisors, that basically they were really good at what they did, and by their own admission were awful at marketing and caught on that hamster wheel that I know many of you can relate to. And I know I've been in that position way too many times, where you do some great marketing or networking or whatever it is, getting the word out, business starts coming in, and then you get incredibly busy with that and completely drop the ball on the marketing part. And then you've got this horrible down period of nothing going on because you realize you've not done any good marketing. So obviously Adam's companies is, what we're talking about today is designed to address that. So he has created what he calls the client catching ecosystem, one that frees up time by removing us from 90% of the marketing and sales process, boosts our authority, generates qualified prospect, and increases sales, all without spending a penny on advertising. And in order to catch a fish, and this is something I must admit I can't wait to talk more about. You need to think like the fish, not us, not the person that's trying to generate the business, not the fisherman. So when you understand that what the fish want and use the right bait to attract them, you'll always catch them on. This will way more sense, I think, as we get into it, at least for you, for me anyway. Maybe I don't speak for anyone else. So Adam, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks
very much for having me, Matt. It's great to be here.
It's terrific. And so I always like to start off with a sort of the get out of your own way question, which from your perspective is from a marketing standpoint, which, most people would argue is one of the two most important things in any business. We have to keep innovating and doing new things. Otherwise we're not growing. But we also need to be getting our name out there. Otherwise, what use is it if no one knows about us? So in terms of marketing, how do you see most business owners in terms of where you think they get in their own way the most?
Well, I think when it comes to the marketing side of it, people get in their way a lot because they don't have the consistency in their marketing. Mm-hmm. And when I say consistency, I mean that comes down to a consistency of message, a consistency of look and feel, but also a consistency of actually getting stuff done and implemented on a regular basis, so that you're out there enough, you're getting in front of your ideal clients enough with mm-hmm. a consistent message that really does solve a pain point for people. It shows your expertise. And we get in our own way because we start a lot of the time down a particular path. We'll get diverted by a shiny object, for example, and think, mm-hmm. right, this is the next tactic to go after. And so we start on that, where we've let go what was working before, and we're not doing that. And then, so there isn't necessarily that sort of consistency in the actual implementation, because by nature of who we are as business owners, we get very distracted. And I find that that's a big challenge that we all have. And we get in our own way simply because we don't always have that discipline or that almost self-control to think, mm-hmm. right, I'm going to follow a path that, is based on a strategy that I know works and has been proven. And I'm going to see it through, and I'm going to stick with this for a good, 6-12 months, rather than thinking, right, well, I've given it a week, let's throw it on the back burner.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny. I mean, I suppose the first concern that comes to mind that I would imagine people have is, well, how do you know what you're doing is the right way to market? I mean, isn't that the most tricky part?
It is. And I think that a lot of the time that what people actually consider as marketing is actually not what marketing is. So it's, a lot of people think marketing, and then they immediately think things like advertising. So mm-hmm. they think, the popular thing at the moment is things like Facebook advertising and going on there and doing that. Well, that's one part of marketing. Marketing is very broad. And actually I think marketing is really quite simple when you break it down. It's how you identify a set of people who you are going to dedicate your business to solving a problem for, and how do you communicate how you solve that problem to that group of people. And it's that kind of big picture thinking that can then drive everything, because you can then sort of think, right, okay, I've got, the kind of target clients that I work with, and the kind of message that I say. Now, what am I trying to achieve? What's my end goal? And then how can I work backwards from that? i.e., where are these people hanging out? What kind of things are they responding to? You're not necessarily going to sell, a £50,000 contract by, having a buy now button on your website, for example. So you're not going to set up an e-commerce site or anything silly like that. So some of it is just sort of common sense, but really it's about thinking, what is that journey that a client would go through or a customer goes through on their way to making a buying decision? Now, that buying decision can be to buy from you or not to buy from you, to go with a competitor because actually it might be better for them, or actually to do nothing at all. Because ironically, I always say that the biggest competitor that we face as business owners is not actually a physical competitor. It's people's apathy. And it's their tendency to stay with what they know and in their comfort zone. And that comes on to a lot of how we all get in our own way. A lot of the time we get in our own way because we're comfortable.
That's interesting. It reminds me of a group of bankers I worked with last year and I hear that I've heard this a lot from bankers in recent years, and the many I've interacted with, that they find it hard to set themselves apart, even though they do believe they do good work. They tend to say, they tend to say, it's too much of a pain in the backside to move all your accounts over. And so therefore it's a really hard sell unless people are incredibly unhappy with where they are at the moment. So I don't know if that's an excuse or not in terms of people just getting lazy then about differentiating themselves. But that's where I've heard it the most. But it's interesting. So you're saying the biggest competitor is human apathy. And then what are some steps to the people listening can take to address that more effectively?
So when it comes to specifically overcoming the apathy of people, it comes down to that psychology of your buyer and really deeply knowing your ideal type of client, which is why I say, why I've named my entire business, over this metaphor of thinking like the fish, not the fisherman. Because a lot of marketing out there, I see, it's very, very focused on the business. It's we've been, we were established X number of years ago. We've won these awards. These are our services. This is what we do. This is what we're great at. And it's very, very kind of shouty. It's like going to a party and talking to that guy that just wants to talk about himself. Nobody wants to be stuck with that guy. And it's the same with your marketing. Rather than it being, okay, let's think of it from the perspective of the fish, the person that you are, as I often say, they're your boss in a way. Your client, your customer is your boss, because ultimately they pay your wages, your staff's wages, everybody's wages. So you actually have to set yourself up to serve them and think like them and create marketing that actually speaks to them in a way that gets their attention. That's one of the hardest things, is get their attention. And most people are just shouting louder. Right. Whereas if you create something that's very much along the lines of a problem or a symptom or something that they are experiencing that's related to the solution that you have, then you can start them on that path and that journey. And you're educating. Marketing is education, it's storytelling, it's all those sorts of things. And it's not, ironically, it's not even necessarily about making a sale. It's about getting someone to the point where they can make a decision about whether they buy or not. That's how I look at it.
So first off, from your initial definition, it's about determining first and foremost who you most want to market to. My experience is most people are way too broad with that. In other words, they sort of tend to think that just about anyone can benefit from their services. And I'm exaggerating to a sort of, but what I am definitely saying though is that when you ask people who they most want to work with, they struggle. You tend to get a laundry list. So is that kind of one of the first things that you do when people meet with you, is you kind of help them? Firstly, is that your experience? And then secondly, so therefore is the first thing you do is to help people kind of refine that down so there's more clarity about it? Absolutely.
A lot of the time when I ask someone, who do you serve? And they say anybody with a heartbeat and a wallet. Yeah. Because there is that, I started like that. So it's not like I'm
Right.
immune to any of this.
Sure.
It's how I started, because you have to pay the bills. And if somebody is willing to write a check, then, you're generally going to take it. There does come a point, though, where that's when you become very generic, and that's where it's very difficult to stand out. So if somebody comes to us and says that sort of thing, then it's that process of unpacking it and looking at maybe the kind of people that they work with previously, the people that they enjoy working with. Because let's be honest, you're in business not just to make money, but also to have a sense of purpose and to actually enjoy helping the people that you help. So there's that whole process of going into that, and the kind of things that you, the problems that you solve and the things that you like to do. So it's really sort of understanding that. But ultimately, I think that it comes down to a fear, and a fear of limiting your reach or your potential. Because a lot of people think, well, if I'm going to limit and only go after a specific type of person, then I'm saying no to a lot of people, which I understand. It's a genuine fear and a concern. However, I sort of reframe it and think and sort of say, well, at the moment, you're like this tiny little fishing boat bobbing along the ocean, and you've got your tiny little rod or a small little net. You think you've got some fish down there, but you're not really sure where they are or the type of bait that they might like or anything like that. And you're just kind of throwing it in and hoping, because there's nothing specific. Whereby if you become very specialized and you're able to focus on a very specific type of fish where you know where they are, they congregate, exactly the kind of feeding patterns and the bait that they like and all that kind of thing. And you're the only one that knows that spot. Who's going to catch more fish? The guy trying out on the ocean, or the one in that very specific, tight pool? It's almost like shooting fish in a barrel, to carry on my analogy.
Yeah.
But you can become that big fish in a small pond. And you can make a very, very good business out of that. There's numerous examples of it.
Yeah, and it's funny because it reminds me exactly of all the training and coaching I used to give about referrals. That when you're asking for something, the more clear you are about what you want, the better. And that but it's counterintuitive. The logic would say, well, I should cast a wide net because then I should catch a few fish at least. Whereas if I say, I only want to meet architects in this one town that are helping people with industrial developments, then all of a sudden there's this chronic fear that what if that takes too long to happen, or what if no one I ask knows anyone like that, then I get no money. So that's, again, so how do you, because that to me, well, to some degree is an internal fear. So where does the psychology part come into your work then? Like, how do you work with clients when you're getting that kind of fear or pushback?
So if we're talking about the clients themselves having that fear and that pushback, it's really about putting in front of them that path, and also saying, look, by going after a specific type of person, you're not saying no to anybody else. You're just kind of hanging your shingle on a particular type. And the beauty about how you can work with your marketing, you can actually have specific marketing for different types of clients. So it doesn't mean that you're tied to that individual forever. You're going to get to where you want to go faster by picking one first and going after that one. And then if you see opportunities and people are being drawn to you, then have the opportunity. So it's almost like, there's a lot of talk about niching, and I don't necessarily like to call it niching. I like to call it marketing specific personas. So you create marketing and campaigns that talk to a specific type of person. And over time, you can add multiple personas that will effectively have the same structure around how you create the campaigns. But the wording and the language, that's all different for those different types of people. A dentist is going to have very different pain points to, say, an accountant. They're both service businesses, or they both work with clients, but they are going to respond to different types of language and life experiences and the problems that they experience. They're going to have different ones and different slight variations, and it's that little bit of effort that will suddenly put you ahead of everybody that's sort of shouting the Me Too stuff.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a story about, just sort of bring it to life, about, you know, somebody that came to you where they were, the little boat bobbing on an ocean, and kind of what they did next?
Yeah, so there's a lady I'm working with at the moment, and she's in Switzerland, and she provides access to sort of private banking facilities in Switzerland, and also residency programs and citizen programs. And she literally came to me and said, you know, the world could be mine. And that is true because of what she does. But we had to get really specific and say, well, let's have a look at this. You know, you've got people that you're competing against that are large firms and all that sort of thing. And the way I actually showed it to her was I took her through LinkedIn. I actually said to her, look, you could do this. So you could just type in whatever it is that you're saying. She was saying entrepreneurs. That was who she was going to work with. So we typed in entrepreneur into search in LinkedIn and got a ridiculous number of results.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, do you know how long that is going to take you to reach all of those people? You can either spend a lot of money advertising to them, or a lot of time connecting on LinkedIn, or a lot of time doing all sorts of things there. However, let's just try something different. She had a background. She had a corporate background and all that kind of stuff, and banking background. But she is she's from Afghanistan originally. And so we started looking at those sort of countries that are underserved and all the rest of it. And we started whittling down. And it became a much more bite-sized chunk of potential clients that she could work with. And that suddenly helped her to see that actually the elephant is humongous unless you break it down into small bite-sized pieces.
And then was she marketing then through LinkedIn, or so where does the system come into it?
So the system comes into it, and that's, this is just the sort of the first piece, and actually it's the most important piece. So, defining your ideal target market, defining the problem that you solve, articulating and presenting the solution that you provide someone in a way that they can understand, and it is clear how they can work with you and the kind of process that you go through, and then the message that you use to communicate that. And then you start to look at the assets that you need to create within your marketing that will go into your system, or your ecosystem, as I call it.
And what do they range from to, nowadays?
So you're talking about the assets, or the...
I don't know. Whatever comes after the initial work of finding out who you should be targeting and what your message is. I'm just curious because, in other words, again, and keep in mind too, we've spoken a couple of times, but my entire 17 years in the business world really has been exclusively old-fashioned, in the trenches, networking, one-to-one meetings, all face-to-face stuff. So I feel very ignorant about, I don't even, even understanding marketing really. I mean, I feel like I understand what sales is, but marketing always seemed kind of a gray area to me. And it always sounded like even marketing companies couldn't know for sure what was going to work, and that maybe it was 50-50 in terms of what would work and what wouldn't. And anyway, so it always seemed like much more of an art form. Although I guess the truth is networking is the same thing. I guess there's absolutely no science to human relationships. So I'm just curious what kind of things go into people's systems. I mean, even if you just kind of paint a picture of the range.
So you're right. You touch on there that it's both an art and a science. Yeah. So the art piece is very much around getting to know who that ideal client is, figuring out their language. And by the way that we help people figure out the kind of language and the things that are keeping them up at night is a little bit like what you've referred to there. You go old-fashioned, you have a conversation with someone, you interview them, you ask them questions, done in a very specific sort of sequence that is designed to open them up. Mm-hmm. using things like Socratic questioning, whereby you probe deeper and you find out the kind of, the real reasons behind some of the things that they do and they say and they don't do, for example. So that's sort of the art thing, and then that's crafting the message that goes into it. But really the system of it, the science of it, what that is, and it is a little bit like, or the one that I use, so for example, the client catching ecosystem. Essentially, what that is, we have the sort of the lead generation side of it, which is very much based around relationships, strategic partnerships, and a little bit like old-fashioned networking, but just brought into a modern era. Mm-hmm. So we use what we refer to as an authority bridge. It could be a podcast, for example. Could use a YouTube channel. You could set up an individual private joint venture mastermind, those sorts of things. You could have groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, however you want to sort of use that. And then what you're doing is that you are systematically and strategically reaching out to people to bring them. So you're looking to bring them into your world using that authority bridge. So that has two functions. One, it's a bit like a prospecting tool on steroids. Because as service providers, you don't generally need thousands of clients. You have a very specific number of clients that you might be able to work with, unless you're going to literally restructure your entire business and hire a lot more staff. So you can be quite specific with the type of people you attract, you go after. But also, so you can have two types. You'll have people that you would like to work with as a client specifically, or people who have those fish in their own private rivers. Mm-hmm. And so you are simply using that authority bridge as a way to have a conversation with someone. And that's what it all comes down to. It's human connection, it's still relationship, and it's still conversation. So that's the big piece that starts a lot of conversations. And it also nurtures relationships over time, because as people come in and share some of the things that you do, then you put your feelers out there a lot more. Right. The system part of it, though, is how you would then follow up, or how you would get someone. So it's all very well someone listening to a podcast or watching a video on YouTube. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have a call to action that actually allows you to dictate that relationship, we start with a simple piece of bait that we call it, which is referred to in the trade as a lead magnet, or whatever you want to call it. Somebody gives you their information. You send them the piece of bait. That could be a video you opt into, a report. It could be a book you've written. It could be, the format doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is it has to be something that will solve a specific problem for your ideal client, that is actionable, but it's incomplete in that it shows that this is part of either a wider solution that you need to do to solve your ultimate problem. So it's always put in context, and then it's to take the next step, which generally with what we do is to book an appointment. Now, not everyone's going to do that. So the system has the ability to follow up. Mm-hmm. We have a series of emails which are pre-written. They drip out over time. And then we also have what we call is the reel, which is a masterclass presentation, which is a much more personal, or it's a much more time, that there's more time that is invested for that person to get to know you, to really go. So if somebody's going to invest 60 to 90 minutes of time watching a webinar, they are going to be, or you're going to assume that they have much more of an interest in the solution that you offer, or they are really experiencing the problem. So that whole point of that is to educate someone very, very deeply, build a little bit of rapport with them. Again, it's without you actually having to be there and do it. And then you have the automation side of the system, which sets the appointments. It personalizes a lot of the welcome. It makes them feel prepared for any kind of conversation. It answers objections, so that essentially by the time you are physically having a conversation with someone, they are 90% decided on whether or not they're going to work with you.
That's really interesting. And it's funny because I haven't watched all your masterclasses, but I mean, from being interviewed on your podcast, I've noticed now, how many of those processes you have in place for communicating various different pieces to the process. I mean, way more than anyone else has that I've been interviewed by, and so now it's starting. So now the light bulbs are just about starting to light up for me, to see how this can then apply to acquiring clients as well. And as I suppose you've alluded to, all of this is stuff that is automated, so it doesn't involve your own time and other people having to make phone calls and play phone tag and re-explain the same thing over and over again to the same people. That's really interesting. And then it sounds like there's also an educational part of the process. So there's things so someone's interested in your marketing services. Can you kind of remind me, not with every single step, but what education are they getting from you that's automated versus where they've got specific questions for you?
So the process is automated from literally the first time that, well, let's consider it from the perspective of somebody has been interviewed on the podcast, and that person has shared the episode with their audience. Mm-hmm. And there's somebody in their audience that listens to the podcast and they hear a call to action and they go in and opt in to receive the piece of bait. Mm-hmm. That whole thing for me personally has been automated because I haven't had to have any kind of interaction except for, the systems that sort of set up the episode and give the person that was interviewed some of the content that they can use to share and all that sort of thing. That person then opts in, they read the piece of bait that it may well be, they get into the system, and at some point they'll either register for the full masterclass, or some of them will just come directly and schedule an appointment. Mm-hmm. Some will, so what? And that's the beauty of the system, is that it meets people where they are. Mm-hmm. And that's when I come back to that whole consistency piece.
So different types of personality types. So some people are very decisive and they're like, okay, this looks great. I need to watch a masterclass on this. I like what I'm hearing. Then they can just pick up the phone and set up a meeting with you. But if they're more, whatever, they just need more time to deliberate, or they're more detail orientated. Is that correct? Then they might do more research. So they'll say, okay, yeah, I'll watch that masterclass and then get more information. Okay, that's really clever. Okay, because now that's an area I must admit I have to raise my hand. I just read bits. I've probably read more than bits, but I feel like I've never really grasped how to present to different personality types effectively. I just feel like I just hope that I resonate and connect with enough people so that I can make a good living. But I've never really mastered that piece to say, oh, this person's this type of personality, so I need to use this type of language, or so so can you talk a bit about that, or how that relates to the ideal client?
Yeah, so I mean, that again, it comes back to the ideal client situation. And if you've got a type of client, yes, you can define that type of client by demographics and income and business size and all the rest of it. But if you also want to work with a specific type of person, if you love working with type A personalities, don't make your messaging and your content meek. Mm-hmm. They like to deal with those type of people. So ironically, marketing, when designed well, it attracts the people that you want to work with, but it also repels the people that aren't going to be a good fit.
Yeah, right.
And that can also scare a lot of people, because you've got to be authentic with the messaging that you use. If you're not that kind of type A personality, and you right. do naturally sort of sit quietly and all the rest of it, then suddenly putting out a load of marketing out there that is very bullshit is not going to necessarily, it's not going to connect, and people will start to sense it. But if you are that type of person, you love working with it, then you can be bold in your marketing. Yes, you will upset people. Mm-hmm. But that's good, because they're not the kind of people that you want to work with.
That's really good to hear, because you certainly nailed me on that one. And as I sit here, or stand here, though, I also think that for you as a marketer, presumably you do need to be able to help people communicate to different personality types, because their prospects may well obviously fit those different boxes. So how have you learned that? Because I mean, presumably, obviously, you've got your own personality type. So how do you learn how to do that?
I just find people fascinating. I like talking with people. I like understanding what makes us tick.
Right.
I listen to a lot of podcasts. I do, it's not. I couldn't point to one single thing.
Mm-hmm.
I just have a genuine curiosity.
But if I said, or not, but, and if I, so if I said that, which I don't, but I mean, if I have a business that's targeting, let's say, I'm now stereotyping horribly, like social workers, teachers, nurses, librarians, or, I don't know, how would you handle that?
Well, first of all, I would find a number of those people that either you've worked with previously or that you want to work with.
Yeah.
And again, I would have a conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a conversation with them using, as I say, like there's a specific sort of type of questioning process that we use to really uncover it. But really what it is, it's trying to really uncover the sort of the pain point and the way that they talk about the problem. And you interview them, essentially. You record the interviews and you transcribe them. You don't take notes, you actually transcribe, because you end up translating, and that doesn't ever then translate. And so one thing that you will suddenly realize is that your ideal clients will give you they'll give you so many ideas for content and, as we call copy and all that kind of thing.
Right.
That you don't need to be a master copywriter, because your ideal client, once you've defined them, will give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can start to structure the way that you have your messages based on the language that somebody else has actually given you, that they've either been a client and you love working with them, or you've identified them as someone that you would love to work with as a client.
Mm-hmm.
And you start using that language back at them.
That
you
makes
define
sense.
the problem, you agitate it, you hint at the solution, you talk about the story that has been given to you by that individual or said a number of individuals, and you talk it in their language. You don't necessarily talk about yourself.
So you don't just think like a fish, you talk like the fish as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm not going to do an impression of what a fish sounds like, but
no, that makes, it's a funny, when you explain it, it sounds so obvious. But
it's what people are scared of.
My mind.
They think that there is a shortcut. They think that there is some magic bullet to marketing that, I could throw something up on Facebook and, actually that's not exactly what it, or, I'll build this fancy funnel or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
What we do is actually really quite simple. But the hardest thing is that bit at the beginning. It's really understanding the person that you are in business. The whole reason that you exist is to understand that person that you are trying to help and to serve.
Yeah. It's so funny too. A couple of weeks ago, maybe more, but not much more, I had a client that I was coaching, and I'd asked him to think about, what are the biggest pain points that you help clients with. And I feel like for the most part, what he came back to me were the three biggest benefits, or the three best things his company does, which to me weren't the same things. They were sort of more features that, I don't know, people in that role assume to be the biggest selling points. But I didn't feel like, for the most part, I mean, maybe he threw in one pain point, but I just felt like it actually required a lot more thought than he probably realized it needed. And of course, the other challenge was, perhaps in his situation, was he was newer to his business, so he was probably more in a position where he was willing to help almost anybody. But I do want to reiterate something you've said, because that's for my own benefit as well. But some of the people I've interviewed who are top producers in sales, one of the things that seems to be very, very common, I mean, I don't want to say it's true for every single one, that would probably be a stretch, but just how the vast, vast majority of them do have a really, really specific focus. And what helps them is just that gives them more psychological air to say no a lot more. And it goes off on a different subject, which I don't know if we need to talk about on this podcast, because I feel like I've talked about it a fair bit with others, but just the whole topic around people pleasing. But that's such a barrier because, well, most people, yeah, they like their business a lot. They really love what they do and they want to help people, but it's too broad. And then they start taking on mediocre tasks or tasks that don't pay a lot, but they're trying to be nice and they hope maybe it'll lead to something else. But it is really interesting how the people at the top have a much more, and I think I'd like to think of it, there's no arrogance to it. I think it's more just a healthy self-confidence to be able to just say no a lot more, well, and not chase the shiny objects anything like as much. But as you say, there's a discipline to that. Yeah. So again, the only thing that I keep coming back to is that I still feel like, so help me with this, that there's a big leap of faith with a I suppose like a 12-month marketing strategy to say, gosh, I certainly hope these are the right strategies, because this is a long time to be patient and to invest whatever it is, digital marketing dollars on, or whatever it is that people are, whatever the strategies are. So how do you test for things along the way?
So it's funny that you sort of talk about how difficult we find it to say no. And I kind of joke sometimes that when I first started and somebody said to me, what business are you in? Mm-hmm. I would just say, yes, I'm in the business of yes. I would do whatever anybody asked me to do. So I've done all sorts of things from, building websites to SEO to Facebook ads to all those sorts of things. And, while we can do those sorts of things, they weren't the things that really set us alight. And mm-hmm. It really came back down to, I think it was about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer, I actually sort of took a step back and went, right, what is it that I genuinely love doing? And mm-hmm. what is the problem that I'm really solving? Because it stops then becoming about the actual tactic or the tool or the thing that you do. And how can you base it on a strategy that I know works? So sometimes, yes, that strategy has to be done on a leap of faith. Because if you're going to go and talk to someone who is more of an expert or a specialist in something they do, that's always going to be a leap of faith. Matt, anyone that comes to you, they take a leap of faith. Mm-hmm. So yes, there is always that leap of faith, but that leap of faith is made easier when you can explain where the process or the strategy came from. For example, the entire strategy that this system is based on is good old-fashioned human relationships and reciprocity. That's a strategy that's been in existence for thousands of years, and mm-hmm. Empires from the ancient Romans and Greeks have been built on it all the way up to modern day. People still do business with people. Mm-hmm. Just look around. There's a ton of networking groups going on every day. That's for a reason. People buy from people. Mm-hmm. So you can base a strategy on basic human behavior that we love to connect with social animals, and we actually generally like helping each other along the way.
Yeah.
So if you have that as the core of a strategy, there's not many people that can argue around the actual efficacy of that strategy. And then it just becomes, well, what are the steps or the tactics that you use to power that? And that's why what we do, it's the ecosystem that you build around that strategy, which ultimately is building relationships. And that's why I say you don't need advertising. You don't need any of the, the stuff that people are saying is the next big thing, because they'll come and they'll go. But a strategy based on building relationships, partnerships. I've got multiple examples of previous roles. I was a partnership marketing back in my early days when I was in my 20s. Mm-hmm. That's all I did, partnership marketing. I worked for a big events and publishing company, and we built a lot of the delegate pool from media partnerships, building reciprocal relationships.
Can you explain that, go into a bit more detail on that? Because I actually don't follow exactly what you're saying. So partnership marketing is what exactly? Where you both market towards the same demographic?
No, sorry. So if I use the example, I work for a company called Phoenix IT, and their entire business model was that they worked through partners. So they never marketed or sold to the end user. So they'd work with, big contract providers, IBM, Atos, and they'd have, things like government contracts and all that kind of stuff. They would simply work through a partner. So it's a distribution channel. So they'd work through the partners. And that was my role. It was creating marketing that was just nurturing the relationship between this business and the partners that they work with, who ultimately sold the end contract. And it's funny, the guy that ran the company, the CEO, I think before I got there a few years previously, he bought it for about 50 grand, and it recently floated, and he turned up in a Lamborghini. So it's obviously working for him. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the market, the media partnerships, it was all about giving, because at the end of the day, the press want access to news, information, stories. So we were able to offer either tickets to come and report on the event, or exclusive access to a couple of the speakers if it was agreed, and all the rest of it. And they would simply agree to either write a piece promoting the event, or send or publish or something like that. So there was no advertising per se, because it didn't cost, except giving something that the other person also wanted. So that was a very, very effective, and you see it all the time. You have sponsors and partners for all types of events, from festivals to very specific industry type conferences. But the thing that sort of stands out for me was, I remember hearing a podcast, and Jay Abraham was being interviewed. Whether you know Jay Abraham.
Hang on. Explain who he is, because I've heard of him, but maybe people listening haven't.
Well, put it this way: they refer to him as the $9 billion man for a reason. It's because he's a very smart marketing guy. He's worked with all sorts of people, like Tony Robbins, for example, and they're bosom buddies, I think. But he was asked on this podcast, Jay, if we could take away everything that you know, and you're left with one strategy. And when I say take away everything you know, so your list, your reputation, everything, what's the one thing that you would do if you had to start everything all over again? He said partnership marketing, without doubt. And that's I found that very interesting, and that's actually, listening to that podcast was what led me to revisit the whole what has worked in the past. Mm-hmm.
So again, partnership marketing, and I know probably everyone listening's got it, except me, maybe. But so the idea is that it's synergizing. So it's kind of like a strategic alliance, really. It's where you're...
Yeah, I mean, it can be called all sorts of things. Right. Joint ventures, referral partnerships. Right. It could be me and you, Matt, having a conversation and then realizing, actually, there is, there's a synergy between, both of our audiences. Why don't we work on something? Either it could just be pure content distribution. There could be a commercial aspect to it. It's up to the individuals that are involved in that. It could be, you could work with another type of business that offers a similar type of service to you, but not the specific thing you do.
Right.
So you can offer those.
Right. So it's finding mutual benefit for both parties.
Absolutely.
Whatever that looks like. So your example with the media was you gave them first opportunity to get news stories based on from the events that you were holding, and maybe first opportunity to talk to some well-known speaker, and in return they would promote your event. Is that what basically it's a kind of a mutually beneficial way to help somebody else that benefits your business? And it's funny, so this is brilliant. So so now I'm getting it better. Well, I think again I've been so narrowly focused on a tiny number of industries that I feel like I know intimately inside out and back to front, but it's applying it now on a grander scale. But the other reason I think it matters is, for those of you who are more familiar with my past work, is I think the wake-up call for all of us is perhaps being infinitely more creative about other mutually beneficial ways we could help different types of businesses or organizations in a way that would benefit us. I mean, a totally elementary idea that that maybe is underutilized might be talking to some event place that would be a great place to bring people together, but you don't really want to pay the significant room fee or what they're charging, but you then explain to them, well, they're going to make plenty of money from food and drink and repeat events or whatever other benefits that might come into. I'm just thinking this out loud, but it's that type of thing that we could probably all be more creative with, because that's another massive thing. Again, talk about a sore spot for me is, having been self-employed for so long, living like an island instead of, think either that do-it-yourself mindset, which I think is incredibly common amongst people who are self-employed salespeople in particular, and small business owners. I mean, we wanted to get away from something bigger, but then we go too small or put too many things on our shoulders. So rather like the niche topic or the niche market, so you didn't like niche market, but rather like a very clear ideal client, or it's also about being much more, but then also in terms of spreading our wings. And I'm just thinking this out loud. We need to do a much better job of synergizing with other people that have something beneficial to offer our network that's different from what we're doing, and not see. Yeah. Okay.
And if anyone wants to sort of dive into this a little bit more, it's sort of based loosely around, again, a very well-known book that talks about the Dream 100 by Chet Holmes. So look that one up and see, or just Google Dream 100 and people probably or may not know what that is. But essentially it's about how you identify either your Dream 100 type of client or your Dream 100 partners, and then how you would then systematically go about building and nurturing a relationship with those people. And you do it in a way where you actually think, right, okay, what is this individual that I want to work with? What is it that they would want? I'll give you an actual concrete example of what I've done in regard to this. In that, I see it as we have so many assets within a business that we don't necessarily know that we have, and access is one of those assets. We're obsessed with the ownership of things, but we don't necessarily consider access as an asset. So we can start creating access. It's like a distribution channel within our own businesses. However, we can plug into other people's access, other people's assets, which is their audience, their distribution channel. And coming back onto the the concrete example, because I'm about to go off on a tangent. There's and this comes into why systems has been so vital for me, by the way, if you want to touch on that in a bit. But
yeah, sure.
I went to a mastermind event a few weeks back, organized by a guy called Chris Ducker, who runs a company called Upreneur. And I genuinely think that what they do is fantastic. I've been to their November events and all that sort of thing. And I used my podcast, my authority bridge, as a way to gain access to that audience. In that I thought, what is somebody that is running an event like this going to really, really value, that's going to make me stand out and be different, to have a conversation about how to be put in front of their audience in a more authoritative way. So I simply created a podcast episode based on Mastermind, the value of it, what I got for it. But I went a little bit further. I interviewed not Chris Ducker himself, but one of his team members. And I shone the light on her and then 3 other people that were at the event. And this whole episode is talking about the value of masterminds with their company's mastermind as the backdrop to the case study of it. Now that podcast episode is going to be distributed to their entire audience, their list, their email list, and all that kind of thing. So it benefits me. Do I know exactly what's going to come out of it? No. But I can guarantee you something will.
Yeah. That's a great example.
And that was because I just thought, what would somebody who is influential, probably has 1 million people trying to bang his door down. Oh, can you promote me? Can you do this? Because that's the wrong way to go about partnerships.
Right.
You have to lead with something first of value, which is why I love podcasting. You interview someone and you get to ask them deep questions about themselves, show off their expertise, and actually, and really make them feel great. That's leading with value. Promote them. And then you can have a conversation about what you might want.
I believe it or not, that actually hasn't crossed my mind yet. But I have noticed with one person, I guess, that interviewed me, where after we were done, then he did kind of have something that, to offer in terms of a business proposition. And I was naive enough to be kind of surprised by it, to be honest. But now you're talking about it, I can see where it all starts to sort of fit. That it's, and I'm saying this in an honorable way to anyone listening that's thinking about doing something like this, but it could be just as easily, well, I suppose it perhaps not quite as effective, but I mean, it could be a blog, right? Or it could be certainly videos and YouTube and other things, or Instagram, certainly some people's flavor too. But just as a different way to promote or help or, expose other people to your own network is, again, I think perhaps many of us aren't terribly creative about that. I guess some people might put on panel discussions, certainly networking events where you bring different people can be valuable too. But probably much better if it's someone that fits that 100, what do you call it, the Dream 100 list, to maybe where you have them speak to people in your network and, as you say, make them more of an authority. In other words, in terms of a live event opportunity could be an alternative way to do it. So I'm just thinking this out loud.
This all comes down to something you touched on earlier, Matt, which is none of us are an island.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be connected. Like, I lovingly call my system the ecosystem, the client catching ecosystem. But it's also like we all live in an ecosystem. The entire world is an ecosystem. We are all connected in some way or another with everything around us. And I look at it like, if you can have a positive impact on the individual system that you are, so that comes down to everything from what you put in your mouth to the kind of behavior you have towards other people, to the kind of morals and the way that you behave to other people, and the impact that you make on others, but also what you decide you're going to do to help other people. Because you can't run a business without trying to help someone, unless you are a complete scam artist, that's the negative impact on the ecosystem. And that may not ever come back on you, but it will have a ripple effect. Look at all the people that have been burned by pyramid schemes and the Madoff scandals and all that kind of thing. Like, that had a negative ripple effect to so many people, because that individual didn't consider how they are connected to many, 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 many people.
Mm-hmm.
But you have the opportunity to be just as impactful, but in a positive way, because that ecosystem that exists around you, as long as you put positive, value-driven first things out into it, it grows organically. You feed it fertilizer and, the whole system grows.
Right.
But if you feed it poison.
No, this is starting to really come together. So I want you to talk, before we wrap up, give if only one more time, really, about the nature of the system. And I suppose specifically from a standpoint of, from most of the people listening, from making life easier in terms of automation. Because what I've gathered so far, and I'm improvising wildly here, that a lot of this, it sounds like, is around, firstly, it starts with intense clarity about who you're marketing to and what problems you're solving, and having a much smaller focus, which also means saying no a lot more. And correct me when I'm done. But then then adding value, adding significant value on a consistently. That's the massive part to the system itself, and automating as much of that as you can that's appropriate. And then from a marketing, that is the marketing system, but then it's also another piece to that, of the partnership piece that we talked about. I know I'm pretty sure you talked about, then there's the authority bridge, right? So there's this, that's the basis of the system.
Part of that system.
Yeah.
So as I say, it's an ecosystem. There's parts of it. It's first that clarity, and then the system part of it is just how it gets implemented consistently. I've had to do this. Like, it's almost like if I hadn't done this, things would have fallen apart, because I was a late diagnosed ADHD adult, and I spent my entire life struggling with what most people find quite simple: organization. Just far too much impulsivity, which actually ironically makes good entrepreneurs, because we're natural risk takers, and we almost just act before we think, but that has that natural tendency to go all over the place. So I've had to systemize a lot of this stuff, because I'd forget, or I'd get distracted, and I wouldn't do the things that I knew I needed to do, like follow up, like literally make sure that everything was consistently being done. If it was left to me on a to-do list, it just wouldn't get done. Send this email. That's why automation has been brilliant for me. Automation can mean anything. Anything that you do that doesn't require you to deliver it on an individual one-on-one basis. Right. Automation could simply mean a staff member. So it doesn't actually always have to mean the tool. Automation could be a postcard or a letter that you send at scale. So I always sort of say, don't get caught up in the tools or the automation label. It's about how do you deliver your message at scale and consistently, and in a way that you get to design. And that's what the ecosystem does.
Well, and also, though, presumably not spend lots of time here and there and all over the place doing low-paid work that could be done differently, whether, as you say, whether it's by an automated system or by other people who are good at that kind of thing and are happy to do that kind of work. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I mean, once the system's set up, you can get this done in 1 to 2 hours a week. That's what it takes me. And yes, there's work up front to set it up, or we do it. But when you then have that's one of the big problems that we solve. It's not even necessarily about the marketing of the business. It's the mental clarity and the ability to free up a business owner to actually operate in their zone of genius and not be turning up to work at the beginning of the week or the month thinking, oh God, now what do I do to market my business? Right. I'll better find a networking event to go to, or maybe I should update my website or write a blog or blah, 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 blah. You don't have to think about it anymore. It allows you to be the business owner and the CEO. And you're really only, as a business owner, you're there to do a few things. You're there to build relationships, to set the vision, to maybe be the figurehead. You can work with clients if you wish. You don't have to. And it's develop IP, and that's it. You look at the CEOs, the Bransons, the Bezos, all the rest of it. We tend to have a to-do list as long as our arm. They don't. They never look rushed, but they're some of the most in-demand people in the world, but they focus on very, very specific things. Mm-hmm.
That sounds really good.
And that's what this system allows a smaller business to do.
Right. So for people who want to learn more about this, and I can't imagine why anyone wouldn't, where do they go for this information or to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, so I've set up I practice what I preach with the systems and all the rest of it. So I've set up a specific page of our website where there's a few things for your audience there. Okay. It's thinklikeafish.co.uk/Matt Anderson. Okay. And you can go there. There's a copy of my book that you can get there. You can find the podcast. You can join our Facebook group. You can register for the masterclass. There's some extra trainings there. There's a load of stuff on that page there where you will be able to see exactly literally how you can create your own version of a client catching ecosystem in your business.
That sounds really good. So that will be on my show notes page, matt-anderson.com, although it sounds like you can go there, well, of course, anytime. So it was thinklikeafish.co.uk/Matt Anderson. Is that right?
That's right.
Perfect. Okay. Any other links that you want to share, or is that one kind of take care of pretty much anywhere? That
one will take care of pretty much anything. You can register everything. The website is obviously thinklikeafish.co.uk, or you can go and look. The podcast is the Client Catching Podcast, available iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and all the places that you may well listen to your podcasts.
Excellent. That's awesome. And then one final question, I suppose, which changes the pace of this again. But I'm curious. So going back to, you mentioned about the attention deficit challenges. Going back to those days, who have you become since then?
I've become someone that used to think he was broken, to to someone that thinks that actually this is kind of a superpower. I've had to deal with these challenges, and not finding out about this until I was in my 30s. That comes with 30 odd years of being told that, you know, you're a pain, or you're you're disruptive, or you're this, that, and the other, and all the rest of it, and all of that sort of thing that psychologically, you know, bash you down and bash you down and bash you down, and you know, those things still exist. You know, you're always the one that was told to shush, the one that was told to sit still, the one that was told to, and then, oh, well, you just got to try harder, or, you know, if he just applied himself, he'd do much better, and all that kind of thing. Whereas actually, it just wasn't channeled in the right way. But now I actually realize that, and I can focus all of that. I mean, the beauty of you know, this superpower, I can hyper focus on something for an amazing amount of time, which means I can really implement. But it's the way that I've realized it actually allows me to think in different ways and find solutions to problems that others wouldn't think of, because I've heard it described as, it's a bit like your brain's like the Library of Congress with no filing system, but sometimes you can just piece it all together. And that's how I see it. And yeah, I go off on tangents. You may have picked it up during this, and that can be one of the things that I used to let bother me. My wife tells me I need an editor sometimes when I talk. But now I just accept it, because I know that that's just me. That's the way my brain works. And I can't apologize for it. It's the way it is. But I have found ways of not just living with it, but actually I've turned my own problem into a solution.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's become your purpose too, which is really, really compelling, I think. And I'm so glad I asked that question, because I almost thought about just, not, because it's sort of out of sequence a little bit, but I always like to ask that question. But that's really compelling. And that's because that's a long time to go through a lot of pain and challenge, and then to feel like now you've got some actually extremely significant solutions. And the other piece to this too is, while your scenario may have been more extreme, I don't know. I do feel confident enough to say, for most people who are really good in sales and who are entrepreneurs, I mean, the vast majority of them are, what this guy Mike Maddock, who I interviewed a couple of weeks back, talked about as ideas monkeys, or they're the innovators. And so they are the ones that typically are full of great ideas. And what we cannot survive without, and I don't say that to exaggerate, what we cannot survive without are good implementers. And we've got to have those pieces if we're going to be successful. And so it's not an option. And so what you're providing is a huge piece to that. I don't know if it's the whole piece, but it's certainly a huge piece, because we can't thrive without marketing that's effective. So thank you. It's helped me kind of piece things together even more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the whole. It's not the magic bullet, but it does help. Yeah. And I often say this, a similar sort of thing. It's, you can make a choice, because most people come to me when they're at plateau. They've got a bit stuck. They've got to where they are through sheer grit, hustle, and determination, and just being blooming good at what they do. And I often say to them, well, you've got two choices. You either go and find someone that can implement, or you implement a system. Because the system will take you so far. You will still need people. It doesn't replace the need for people. But yeah, that's that. It's one of those things. I've created a business out of my own problem.
Wow, that's often the way many people are very successful. So good for you. That's awesome. Do know we need to wrap up here. So Adam, thank you so much for sharing. It's funny, I wasn't sure how extensive this subject would go for me, because I don't know a lot about it, but that helps, because I guess I'm curious too. But it's nice to have, frankly, more clarity about where it all fits in and how to go about doing it, even though I don't know how to do it all myself. That's not the point anyway. So thank you for that very much. For those listening, I think, again, the easiest place to start, it sounds to me like, would be to go to Adam's site, the thinklikeafish.co.uk, and certainly if you wanted to do some homework in advance before any of that, getting more clarity about who your ideal client is and what problems they need solving, and again, even more so, the think like the fish mindset, that we're not here to boast about how wonderful we are, but to better understand who we're serving and how we can help. And that too is an enormously significant takeaway that very few people in sales and business, I think, ever fully grasp. So a ton of really useful stuff. I guess I should wrap up myself here. But anyway, all the information will be on the show notes, matt-anderson.com. Adam mentioned masterminds. I am now creating them too. So look out for more information on that shortly, or just get in touch, because I've already started running them and finding them amazingly profound and helpful. But with that, thanks again, Adam. And I'll wrap up as I like to do with my absolute favorite question, which is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I'm Matt Anderson, and this was The Road Not Taken.